So good morning, and thank you very much for coming to this press conference where we're going to announce felony charges in commercial sexual exploitation crimes, and we're in the middle of Human Trafficking Prevention Month, and we want to draw a special attention to this issue, and you will hear the various speakers behind me when they speak talk about the situation dealing with human trafficking here in Los Angeles County. Human trafficking is nothing short of modern-day slavery. It is a multi-billion-dollar business, and Los Angeles, unfortunately, has a tragic distinction of being one of the nation's capitals of human trafficking. Now, what is human trafficking? Human trafficking is the illegal commercial exploitation by force, fear, fraud, or coercion of individuals for either sex purposes or labor purposes. And the reason we are here in this Figueroa Corridor is especially to call attention to where it is located. It is located up and down the blocks of where we are standing right now. You will see in both the press release, we have hyperlinked videos showing that showing that what we are talking about the young girls or women who are engaged in this sex exploitation by pimps and human traffickers that is occurring right here. The photographs you have on either side of this podium are ones taken from this spot. Now, this used to be an activity that the only time you could see it was at night, but not anymore. These photographs were taken during the day. And it's usually young girls and women that represent over 95% of the human trafficking, the sex slave population out there. They are some of the most vulnerable population in our society and have no defenses, that are getting recruited by these traffickers on the internet. They are runaways. They are people from the foster system, where they basically aged out of the foster system and ended up right here on these streets. This is completely unacceptable. This is disgraceful. And what you will hear is that there have been regional task forces that have worked incredibly hard to bring these human traffickers to justice. There's the Los Angeles South Bureau Human Trafficking Task Force. There's the Los Angeles County Regional Human Trafficking Task Force. We are joined here today by members of the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office, the Long Beach City Attorney's Office, Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, the Los Angeles Police Department. We are joined by members of the District Attorney of Los Angeles County's office. We are joined as well by the Pomona Police Department Chief, Michael Ellis, the Southgate Police Department Chief, Darren Arakawa, and the Inglewood Police Department Chief, Mark Fronterata. And we are joined as a unified front because I want to send a message to the human traffickers who are engaging in these despicable acts. The question is not if, but when you will be arrested, when you will be prosecuted, and when you will be sentenced. And when you are sentenced, we are going to seek the maximum punishment. Let me give you an idea what that looks like. Recently, we have brought a case against Darren Atkins. Darren Atkins engaged, as the charges have shown, in human trafficking, sex trafficking, right here on this Figueroa Corridor, involving a minor, a young girl under the age of 18, and one just over the age of 18. Darren Atkins, as the charges establish, or will establish in court, and I want to make it very clear when we talk about charges. Charges are not evidence. Charges are not evidence. Everybody is presumed innocent until proven guilty. But we will prove these people guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in court. And Darren Atkins will be looking, because of his background, at 70 years to life in prison if convicted on all charges. Fabian Gilbert was charged recently, again, with respect to a felony count of pandering and one count of felony possession of a firearm. He faces a special allegation of a felony offense while out on bail. He is looking at 8 years and 8 months as a maximum term in prison. Kevin Thomas has been charged recently for involvement with various types of human trafficking offenses. He is looking at a maximum sentence of 12 years in prison. And those are the ones we have recently gone ahead and charged with these crimes. But over the last 6 months, there have been a number of individuals that the human trafficking task forces have arrested, the DA's office has prosecuted, and actually received very long sentences. Let me give you a few examples. Tyrell Davenport, convicted on all charges, 2 counts of human sex trafficking, 1 count of human sex trafficking as a minor. And the reason that's important is that the state legislature recently passed legislation that said if you are involved with human trafficking of a minor, someone under 18, that is a serious and violent offense and constitutes a strike offense. So if you have 2 prior violent and serious crimes on your record, and this is your 3rd, you will then now be looking at a sentence up to life in prison. And let me give you an example using Mr. Davenport's facts that were proven to a jury of the type of situation that we are facing here on the Figueroa Corridor. Mr. Davenport forced one of his victims to travel with him to different areas, held her against her will, threatened her with violence, used physical force to assault her, and coerce her to work as his sex slave. He then branded her with a tattoo of his trafficking moniker, IBN. He put that IBN on her body. It stood for It's Better Now. It didn't stand for It's Better Now. It stand for Mr. Davenport engaged in one of the more despicable acts you can engage in our society with that victim. And because he had 2 prior strikes, Mr. Davenport was sentenced to 75 years to life. Martell Neal, again, another individual recently in the last 6 months who's been convicted on all charges involving human trafficking, pimping, kidnapping, sexual battery, and forcible rape. He was sentenced to 87 years to life. He was a serial sexual offender and a violent sex trafficker. He duped one minor individual into a sexual relationship, quickly morphed into her pimp, and sex trafficked her for several months. He repeatedly beat, strangled, violently sexually assaulted, threatened to kill this victim, and held her small child captive as a means of forcing her to continue working in the sex trade for his financial benefit. Right here on this Figueroa Corridor. We have numerous other cases that have been prosecuted and will be prosecuted. But I'd like to now turn the podium over to the other law enforcement officials who are here who can tell you about the federal, state, county, and city efforts to go after these human traffickers. We'll turn it over then to law enforcement as well to describe law enforcement's efforts in these regards. And then you'll hear from Alia Azaraya, a survivor victim, who will tell you what she and her experiences were all about and what she is doing to help victims who are going through this situation. So let me now turn it over to Acting United States Attorney Joseph T. McNally.
Good morning. My name is Joe McNally. I'm the Acting United States Attorney. And we're here today, as the District Attorney said, because there's nothing more important than protecting the most vulnerable members of our society. That is our children. The problem of human trafficking right here in the Figueroa Corridor is substantial. Sex traffickers come both here locally and from out of state. They use and they traffic minors like commodities, and all for personal profit. The victims here are youth. They come from foster homes. They're often the most vulnerable members of our society. Addressing this problem, as the District Attorney said, requires all of us to come together in a whole-of-government approach. And that is what we have been doing for over the last year. All of us here together are committed to aggressively investigating, prosecuting, and working with community partners to solve the problems here. Let me talk a little bit about our work and some of our goals on the federal side. As you know, our law enforcement partners at the LAPD, the Sheriff's Department, and other law enforcement agencies do fantastic work in this area. What we bring to the table as the federal government, the U.S. Attorney's Office, FBI, Homeland Security, is working these cases as long-term strategic enterprise cases. We bring our resources to focus to bear on sex trafficking involving minors and other individuals who are often using these minors, not just here in the Figueroa Corridor, but trafficking them in Las Vegas and elsewhere. Let me talk about a couple of cases that we've brought recently that I think demonstrate to all of you the gravity of the criminal conduct here. United States versus O'Neill was a case that we brought in the last year. There, the defendant transported 2 minors, including a 13-year-old girl, across state lines to engage in prostitution. The defendant in that case was a violent pimp. He forced the girls to work not only here in Figueroa, but also in Las Vegas. He forced them to transfer between here and Las Vegas, and we have video footage putting 13-year-old minor right here in the Figueroa Corridor who he forced to work the blade. That defendant has been indicted and faces substantial charges. Let me be clear what I mean when I talk about substantial charges. We're talking about pursuing life sentences. United States versus Bradford is a case that we brought last year. There, the defendant would recruit girls from foster care to work as prostitutes for him. He'd film himself having sex with 13-year-old children. One of those girls said she wanted to stop, and he proceeded over video to commit despicable acts. He was tried, convicted, and ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. I want to thank the district attorney for his leadership here, the city attorney's office. This is truly a whole-of-government approach that prosecutors' offices are aggressive on, but we're fully supported by the leaders at the LAPD, the Sheriff's Department, and the many others in the region. And there's a lot of work to be done here, and we look forward to continue to work with our partners. Thank you very much.
I'd now like to introduce Los Angeles Assistant City Attorney Scott Marcus.
Good morning. I'm Scott Marcus. I'm the Chief Assistant City Attorney for the City of Los Angeles, Interim Chief of the Criminal Branch. I'm here speaking on behalf of Los Angeles City Attorney Heidi Feldstein-Soto, who regrets she cannot attend this important press conference today. We'd like to thank our District Attorney, Nathan Hochman, for his leadership and for bringing us together to highlight our collective efforts to combat sex trafficking along the Figueroa Corridor. For too long, this neighborhood has been an epicenter of sexual exploitation and violence. Since day one of taking office, combating sex trafficking of minors has been a top priority for the city attorney, and she has brought the resources of the criminal branch, the public rights branch, and the real estate branch to these efforts. As you know, the city attorney is the chief prosecutor for all criminal misdemeanors committed by adults in city limits. Our office prosecutes johns and pimps for misdemeanors. We also bring civil and regulatory enforcement actions, including nuisance abatement and permit revocations for motels and other businesses that have become significant crime magnets. Our objectives for this work include helping our kids and human trafficking victims leave the life and find a better path, disrupting the johns and the demand along what is known as the kiddie stroll, an area of prostitution and trafficking that features young victims and minors, stopping the illegal activity of motels and other businesses, and holding predators and profiteers accountable. Last year, we formed a multi-agency, multi-jurisdictional task force with Mayor Bass, Council President Harris Dawson, and the LAPD, whose leadership has been instrumental in the success of our joint effort. This task force was formed with the goal of implementing a comprehensive and whole-of-government approach to the work. Together, we have been leveraging our respective resources and authorities to ensure a seamless coordination in the areas of prevention, enforcement, and victim support. The City Attorney's Office has had a number of successes. Last year, we secured a guilty verdict against a 49-year-old man charged with 3 misdemeanors, including solicitation of prostitution from a minor, a 14-year-old girl. His conviction requires him to register as a sex offender. We are also focused on significant problematic locations, ecosystems of illegal activity, using California's red light abatement law, public nuisance law, and unfair competition law. In October, we sued the owner of the Sun Motel, which we allege is an anchor of violent and escalating criminal activity in the clutches of a criminal street gang. Since 2020, it has been the site of at least 7 shootings, over 30 arrests by LAPD, and the recovery of 14 loaded firearms, plus numerous investigations of trafficking, sexual assaults, robberies, carjacking, and sales of narcotics. We successfully litigated a nuisance abatement lawsuit against the New Gage Motel, resulting in a judgment for the people, including a 1-year closure of the motel, civil penalties, and a 10-year injunction upon its reopening. In doing so, we did not forget the women who were living in that hotel, who had already been victimized, and we worked to resettle and find alternative housing for approximately 40 women who were there. We also work with our city's planning department to get use permits revoked when motel owners fail to clean up their businesses, even after repeated requests from the LAPD and from the city attorney's office. The 108 Motel was declared a public nuisance and has been demolished. The New Bay Motel, Boulevard Motel, and Highlight Motel all had their use permits revoked to ensure code compliance, and the Magic Carpet Inn, Broadway Inn, and the Foxy Motel each had conditions imposed upon them to mitigate adverse public nuisance impacts. And our work is continuing. We have numerous other investigations and have conversations underway with other businesses in the vicinity, and we have made tremendous strides on behalf of the victims. In addition to the women who we found housing, we have assisted 183 juveniles, the youngest of which was 11 years old. We've provided assistance to 22 adults. Nearly 2,000 Johns have received Dear John letters, and more than 190 perpetrators and pimps were arrested or cited. This includes 66 felony pimping and pandering arrests, 68 human trafficking arrests, and 85 supervising prostitution arrests. We are going to expand this initiative to the Valley because we now have a blueprint that works. Our focus on human trafficking has exposed loopholes in our state laws that the city attorney is working to strengthen as well. For anyone watching who wants to get out of this life, please call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 888-373-7888. The city attorney would like to recognize some dedicated and talented attorneys from her office who are working on these efforts. Khalil Rashid and Laura Drino from the criminal branch. In addition, our line prosecutors who handle the cases on a day-to-day basis, such as Ralston Henry, who secured the guilty verdict I mentioned before, Leora Foreman-Eccles from the public rights branch, and Chuck Sewell from the real estate branch. Thank you.
Our next speaker shows us that the problem of human trafficking is not limited to the Figueroa Corridor, but there is human trafficking, unfortunately, throughout Los Angeles County. I'd now like to introduce Long Beach City Prosecutor Doug Halbert.
Good morning. My name is Doug Halbert, and I have the honor and privilege of serving the people of Long Beach as their elected city prosecutor. The first thing I wanted to say this morning was to commend the district attorney and to thank him for making this a priority in his administration. As everyone knows, the district attorney has a number of problems to address, and the fact that he took this as an issue that needs to be addressed first gives me great hope. The city of Long Beach, of course, is the second largest city in Los Angeles County. I've been a city prosecutor for 25 years. I've also been the past president of the Los Angeles County Prosecutors Association. So I know I speak on behalf of my own city and all the cities that we are here to work with the district attorney and our local law enforcement agencies to combat human trafficking. I want to note that we cannot combat human trafficking, any one of us alone. This is going to require multi-jurisdictional cooperation. That's why it is so important, and I am so glad to see so many agencies represented this morning working together. In addition to having a multi-agency or multi-jurisdictional approach, I'll also say that we're not going to combat human trafficking unless we have a strategic and comprehensive approach to the problem. We're not going to arrest our way out of this problem, and enforcement is only part of the strategy. I'm happy to hear about services being offered. In fact, in Long Beach, we have provided services to people who are trying to get out of the life for years. The very first law enforcement assisted diversion program in California was a pilot program along the Long Beach Boulevard track from North Long Beach into Compton and to Linwood. That was a pilot program funded by the state that proved that we can get people off the streets and into treatment. We are not going to be successful unless we have a strategy to provide services to people who have been victims of human trafficking and of pimping. So I'm glad that we are also looking at a comprehensive approach here as well. The last thing I would like to say is that as the city prosecutor of Long Beach, I've had the honor of working directly with Sheriff Robert Luna when he was police chief of the city of Long Beach. And I had the pleasure of working with Jim McDonnell when he was both the sheriff of LA County and the police chief of Long Beach. You are not going to find two more dedicated law enforcement professionals that have their skill set than those two individuals. And I know they're not here this morning, but I wanted to acknowledge that the district attorney is not alone in heading up this effort. Having law enforcement leadership like that, as committed and as passionate to this issue as he is going to serve all of us well. Thank you very much for coming today.
Well, you've heard from prosecutors. Now I'd like you to hear from law enforcement. I'd like to introduce Los Angeles Sheriff's Department Special Victims Bureau Human Trafficking Task Force Captain Rich Ruiz.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this press conference organized by the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. I want to thank all our partners for continuing to bring attention to sex trafficking victims in our communities. My name is Rich Ruiz, and I serve as a unit commander for the Los Angeles Regional Human Trafficking Task Force, which is hosted by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. The task force was formed in 2015 and is made up of partners from the local, state, and federal levels, including the Federal Bureau of Investigations, Homeland Security Investigations, the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services, the Los Angeles County Probation Department, the Los Angeles Airport Police Department, the Whittier Police Department, the California Highway Patrol, the Los Angeles Unified School District Police Department, and many other investigative agencies, as well as community-based organizations. Human trafficking is not just a global issue, it's a local crisis. It targets the most vulnerable among us, exploiting women, men, and children for profit. Here in Los Angeles County, we stand as a united front against this heinous crime. The mission of this task force is clear: to disrupt and dismantle sex trafficking networks, bring traffickers to justice, and ensure survivors receive the support and resources they need to reclaim their lives. Our strategy includes three main pillars: prevention, enforcement, and recovery. We're committed to breaking the cycle before it begins. This includes education by raising awareness in schools, community events, and public campaigns, and partnerships by working with community-based organizations to address the root causes of trafficking, such as poverty, homelessness, and a lack of access to resources. Our enforcement efforts are relentless. We utilize data and intelligence to identify trackers and their networks. We collaborate with federal, state, and local agencies to conduct operations targeting traffickers, including sting operations and surveillances. And we ensure that those who exploit others face the full force of the law. Since its inception in 2015, Our task force has rescued 520 victims, 389 of them children, 132 adults, and arrested 2,817 suspected traffickers, pimps, sex buyers, and predators who victimize children on the internet. Finally, we work with our social service and community-based organizations to assist law enforcement in offering victim resources, housing, food, and services to help them heal and begin the recovery process. Got one more page here. To the residents of LA County, we ask for your partnership. Human sex trafficking is not someone else's problem. It's ours to solve together. Educate yourselves. Educate your loved ones. Talk to your children, and stay vigilant in your neighborhoods. If you or someone you know needs help, please contact the Los Angeles Regional Human Trafficking Task Force at 562-946-7960, or you can call LA Crime Stoppers to remain anonymous at 1-800-222-8477. I will be here after the presentations if you have any questions. Thank you.
I'd now like to introduce Los Angeles Police Department Deputy Chief Imada Tingarides, Operations South Bureau.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for providing this space to bring awareness to something that is so critical occurring in our communities, and specifically in this community along this corridor. This concern did not just start 12 months ago. It has been a decades-long issue in South Los Angeles and LA County. And the message today is partnerships in ending the horrific crime of trafficking in this community. You heard a lot today about prosecution, prison sentencing, and the victimization of young men and women in this community. We also talked a lot about a comprehensive strategy. We are not going to arrest our way out of this issue. We have to have a public health approach. A lot of our victims have trauma, post-traumatic stress, mental health, a lack of education, food insecurities, and they themselves have family members that were sexually abused or abused at one point. Prevention is huge in this issue that we are trying to address. We're standing on the corner of Figueroa and 106th Street, the epicenter of this horrific crime. Standing shoulder to shoulder with us, we have our churches, community leaders, nonprofit organizations who collectively are saying enough is enough. And just because we are in South Los Angeles doesn't mean that we can't fix and address this issue. On behalf of Chief McDonald, he is committed to the cause. Our South Bureau Human Trafficking team is here. In 2023, we rescued 61 young women between the ages of 11 to 18 years old. In 2024, we doubled that number and rescued over 120 young women from this corridor right here on Figueroa. We are committed. We are engaging with our law enforcement partners, city, local, state, and federal. But most importantly, this public health approach, this comprehensive strategy working with Journey Out, with Forgotten Children, with our city attorney's office, with all of the other NGOs and nonprofits who are embracing our victims and finding a path on a way out. With that, I'm going to hand it over to our Chief of Detectives from the Los Angeles Police Department, Chief Alan Hamilton.
Thank you, Amada. I'm Alan Hamilton, Chief of Detectives. I'm going to discuss briefly some of the investigative efforts by our department working with our partners, but I first want to acknowledge the help and the assistance that we've received from all of our prosecuting agencies, our fellow law enforcement agencies throughout Los Angeles County and the region, and also the assistance that we've received from non-governmental organizations like Journey Out and some of the other organizations that continue to provide care and assistance to these trafficking victims as we exit them from that life and get them back on track and get them returned to their families and get them, away from this scourge that we have here today. From the investigative side, I just want to make a couple of things very clear. We've talked about some of the efforts that we're making out here along the Figueroa Corridor and throughout really the county of Los Angeles. I want to address this as actually more of a regional and Western United States approach. It is well known by our investigators that these human traffickers operate throughout the Western United States. We know there are tracks in Seattle, in Phoenix, in Las Vegas, in Hawaii, in Sacramento, San Francisco, San Diego. We know where these connections are made. What we're doing now that's a little bit differently is we're coordinating very closely with all of these other agencies and bringing that information in and developing that intel to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck and we're utilizing our resources in the most efficient manner. So physically, you can expect on the investigative level that many of these human traffickers are going to be surveilled, monitored, and prosecuted here locally. But beyond that, we're going to go out regionally. We're going to work with Seattle Police Department. We're going to work with Clark County and Las Vegas. We're going to work with other agencies very closely and make sure that these individuals that are trafficking our kids here in the city of Los Angeles have nowhere to hide. So we're going to follow them where they go after they traffic here to assist these other agencies around the Western United States to continue that pressure on them and remind them that they came through Los Angeles, they're trafficking people here, and we have not forgotten them. We're going to bring them to justice and bring them to prosecution here. The other part, many of the people that are involved in being victimized here, they're reached out to through social media. Parents, I'm going to give the same admonition I've given the last few years regarding your children and their use of social media. You need to monitor the use of social media by your children. I'm telling you right now, human traffickers are reaching out to your children on social media. And they're selling a bill of goods that is going to lead to destruction of lives. Please, 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 monitor your children's social media use and know where they're going online. We are going to be following these suspects all over social media, all over cyberspace, conducting investigations, serving search warrants, obtaining evidence, and bringing them back to the city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, in this region to face justice. As my partners here on the left have said, they're looking for good quality cases, and the Los Angeles Police Department, along with our partners, are going to deliver good quality cases for good quality prosecution. Gone are the days where traffickers could go to different jurisdictions and seek safety and refuge because they were confident that there was not going to be strong follow-up and strong prosecution. We will bring them back here to Los Angeles to face charges. Our fugitive detectives will go out and find them wherever they are and bring them back here to LA County to face justice. So I want to make sure that message is loud and clear. And in closing, in speaking for Amada and for Chief McDonald and all of our partners, the Los Angeles Police Department will continue to work very closely with our partners in bringing each and every one of these individuals trafficking people out here on the corridor and in the city to justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As you've heard from law enforcement, whether the prosecutors or the law enforcement officers themselves, enforcement is a huge priority. But so too is prevention, so too is rescue, so too is recovery. I'd now like to introduce you to Alia Azaraya, a survivor leader, someone who has been a sex trafficking victim, but has channeled that experience to make sure she now helps others survive and go through that situation. She's the director of Aftercare, a Safe House project. Alia.
Thank you for having me today and spending your Wednesday morning talking about such a difficult issue. Like DA Hochman said, my name is Alia Azariah. I'm the director of Aftercare for a national anti-trafficking organization called Safe House Project. But before that, in 2003, I was a 12-year-old girl from Ventura County who was bought and sold all over Southern California. And if there was one thing that perpetuated my trafficking and that my trafficker used to control me and to groom me into exploitation, it was the belief that nobody cared about me. It was the idea that my community, my family, and society as a whole saw me as less than human and worthy of being bought and sold. My story is not unique in that way. It's reflective of the hundreds of thousands of American kids who are trafficked every year, hundreds of which are trafficked on this corridor on Figueroa, many of whom I know by name, many of whom I know as resilient overcomers starting on their journey to healing, who were victimized at their most vulnerable, who were assaulted and abused and groomed and ultimately trafficked by our community, by people within our society who oftentimes get to go home when these youth have nowhere to go. It took me over 10 years to find the services that I needed to get out and stay out of the life. It took me over 10 years to stop the cycle of exploitation, and in that time, the world and how we deal with trafficking has changed. We no longer arrest our girls for being victimized. We no longer turn the other cheek, and we no longer say that this is something that is just a public nuisance that we are willing to overlook as long as it doesn't happen in our backyard or on our street. We've formed task forces, nonprofits, community-based organizations. We've raised up survivor leaders and nonprofits and advocates and investigative collaboratives in order to fight human trafficking. And these decisions prove that lie that human traffickers use to control their victims, that they're less than human, and that no one cares. It proves that these are just lies. As a survivor, I'm hopeful for this next generation of young people that we're serving, that our work will begin to dismantle those lies and prove to them that there is hope. To my brothers and sisters in exploitation and to the survivors rebuilding your lives, we're here, we've made it, there is a way, there's a path out, and this proves it. Bringing attention to these kinds of cases, saying their names, naming our traffickers, proves that we have come a long way from where we were. So I thank you all for being a part of that movement, of proving to survivors that they're worthy of attention and care for oftentimes the first time in their lives by many people who failed them. So I'm grateful that we get to be a part of this collaborative effort together and that I was able to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Alia, for those compelling words. So for all the young girls and boys out there who are in Alia's situation right now, we do care. The people behind me, the Unified Front, is there to support you. Please take advantage of these resources. Please reach out. Your life has meaning, it has self-esteem. Please use these opportunities that we are going to provide for you to break from your trafficker. I know it's hard, but we're there for you. And to the pimps, to the traffickers, to the gang members who think that they can profit from this despair, from the bodies of young girls and boys, young men and women, and exploit them for their sexual purposes and their own personal profit, you are now being presented with a united front. We're going to come after you. We're going to arrest you. We're going to prosecute you, and you will be put in jail for as long as possible. That's not a threat. That is a promise from everyone up here.